Good morning, everybody. Morning. My name's John, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm preaching today. We are in our series in Exodus, which I started 3 weeks ago. We're doing roughly a chapter at a time, and today we have made it to Exodus chapter 4, which contains one of the strangest little stories in the Bible, which I can't wait to get to. I think it's rather fun. We've got a lot to get through, so we shall dive straight in. But first, we do need to do a brief recap. As I mentioned when I kicked this series off, Exodus is a coherent story from beginning to end. And we're dealing with it piecemeal, which means if you're only here today and not for the others, you'd only get a very small part of the story. You do need to be here or to listen to all of it to understand what it means as a whole. Today, I'm just delivering a part, and we're entering in chapter 4, midway through a conversation between God and Moses. So to recap briefly where we are, the Israelites, or the Hebrews, are in Egypt in slavery under Pharaoh. Moses is about 80 years old and living in the land of Midian, which is somewhat distant from Egypt. And he's married a Midianite called Zipporah and had sons with her. Moses was a shepherd and went out with the flocks. God spoke to him through the burning bush, which Neil was talking about last week, and the bush wasn't burnt up. And God and Moses have this conversation where God commissions Moses to go back to Egypt to be the prophet through whom God would free the Israelites and take them to the promised land in Canaan. And crucially, God has identified himself in chapter 3 as the God of Moses' fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, Yahweh, the I Am. And so chapter 4 starts midway through this conversation. If we could have verse 1, please, Liam. I'm reading from the ESV. You may follow along if you wish in your own Bible or read it on the screen. Then Moses answered, speaking to God, "But behold, they, the Israelites, will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say, 'The Lord.'" Actually, I'm just going to pause for a second, because those of you can see, the Lord is capitalized. Maybe some of you don't know this. In your Old Testament, when the Lord is capitalized, it doesn't just mean Lord, when it's like lowercase, just a generic word for Lord. That denotes the actual name of God. Some very old translations will put Jehovah in there. We sometimes say Yahweh today. So when Lord is capitalized, that is the name of God, the great I am, the I am who I am. "But behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say, 'The Lord didn't appear to you.' And so the Lord said to him, 'What's that in your hand?' And Moses said, 'A staff.' And he said, 'Throw it on the ground.' So he threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses ran from it. But the Lord said to Moses, 'Put out your hand and catch it by the tail.' So he put out his hand and caught it, and it became a staff in his hand, that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has appeared to you." Again the Lord said to him, "Put your hand inside your cloak." And he put his hand inside his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous like snow. And then God said, "Put your hand back inside your cloak." So he put his hand back inside his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. "If they will not believe you," God said, "or listen to the first sign, they may believe the latter sign. If they will not believe even these two signs or listen to your voice, you shall take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground, and the water that you shall take from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground." In this chapter, God gives a preview of what's to come. It's like a trailer, if you like, a film trailer. Moses is understandably concerned. Then when he rocks back up in Egypt and says to everyone, "Hey guys, I'm back. Remember me? I left 40 years ago." He's worried that people are going to say, "Who are you?" And then when he explains to them that God has commissioned him to go to them and to be a prophet and to say to them that God is going to rescue them from slavery, and he's met their God, the God of their fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, whose name is I am who I am, Moses is kind of expecting no one to believe him because he's been away. Who are you and what are you talking about? Now, you would kind of think that if you met God in the way in which Moses met God, as Neil went through last week, this burning bush, this conversation with God, that you'd just do what God said. But Moses is only human, and he's weak, and he's frail, and he doubts, even in the face of a very stark miracle. And so God is very gracious to him and gives him these 3 signs to perform, to convince the people that what he's saying is true. Now, these 3 signs are not just magic tricks. They're not just random signs of power. They have meaning and significance. The first is a sign that Moses will throw his staff to the ground and it will become a snake, a serpent, a dragon. and yet he'll have control over it. He can pick it up again, and it returns to being a staff. And this will happen again in chapter 7, in a few chapters' time, when Aaron and Moses will go to Pharaoh, and this is the first miracle that will be performed in front of Pharaoh. They will throw the staff to the ground. Aaron's staff will become a snake. The Egyptian magicians will do the same. Aaron's snake will eat all the other ones up. It's a preview of what's to come. A preview of the first miracle that Moses and Aaron will do. The second sign here, this business with the hand, is the strangest. And this is just me speculating on what it means, because when I looked around, people weren't very clear. So this is what I think it means. You can take it or leave it. But it struck me that if you read Exodus quickly, it talks quite frequently about God's hand. With a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. God saves by his mighty right hand. It's frequently referred to. It was referred to in chapter 3 in this way. And that's why in the story of Exodus itself, you'll frequently hear about God's mighty outstretched right hand. And it's spoken about in the prophets when they allude back to Exodus, or in the Psalms, and it makes it even into some of our songs today. With a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, God saves. But in the story of Exodus, this salvation that God works by his hand is not a neat rescue plan. It's not an easy miracle. Things, as we will see, starting next week, will get much worse before they get better. The Israelites are in slavery, and you think things couldn't get worse, but when God acts by his mighty right hand, things do get worse. The healthy hand, as it were, becomes diseased. So can you imagine, when Moses threw the staff on the ground and it became a snake, it says he recoiled, he ran away, he was fearful. Can you imagine putting a perfectly good hand, he doesn't know what's going to happen, put it inside the cloak. Out it comes, and all of a sudden it's white, leprous like snow. You would recoil from it. How terrifying to have something like that suddenly attached to you. You can't run away from it, but you recoil. And when God acts again, the hand goes in, it comes out clean, restored, it says, like the rest of his flesh. The sign, I think, is like a preview of how God will act. Things will get worse. When God acts, he'll come out. It looks worse than it was before. But you have to press through with patience and faith and trust in what God will do to restore what has been made worse. You need patience and trust in God for him to restore fully. That's the second sign. And the final sign for now is that Moses will turn water from the Nile into blood. And this, of course, is a preview of the first of 10 plagues which will come when Pharaoh hardens his heart and refuses to let the people go. So we have these three previews. The first miracle in front of Pharaoh, the way in which God acts, things will get worse before they get better, and the first of the 10 plagues. And there are more previews to come. But first, we'll have a brief interlude from verse 10 onwards. Moses continues speaking to God. But Moses said to the Lord, "O my Lord, I'm not eloquent, either in the past or since you've spoken to your servant, but I'm slow of speech and tongue." And then the Lord said to him, "Who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak." But he said, "O my Lord, please send someone else." Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, "Is there not Aaron, your brother, the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Behold, he's coming to meet you. And when he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you both what to do. He shall speak for you to the people, and he shall be your mouth, and you shall be as God to him. And take in your hand this staff with which you shall do the signs." And so Moses is given this great commission. He witnesses these great things. He's given this great power, and yet he's reluctant. I don't want to do it. Send someone else. I don't want to dwell too long on this section. It deserves a sermon in its own right. But we do need to pause on it for a moment. See, Moses is one of the archetypal leaders of Israel in the Bible. One of the people who's held up as a great man of God, like King David. And later on, in the Pentateuch, he will be described as the meekest man in the land, a man of great humility, a humble person. And that's a bit surprising, because when you read on what Moses acts like as he leads the people to freedom in the wilderness, at times it doesn't seem like he's very meek and mild. But here, the writer informs us that that's who he is. That's his underlying base character. See, Moses is very reluctant. He does not want the gig. He does not want the job. He's lived in obscurity for 40 years. He didn't go looking for anything. He wasn't ambitious. He didn't go looking for God. God came looking for him. He didn't want it. One of our weaknesses, I think, as humanity is that we love to fall for a strong leader. And this problem has become acute for us in this present age, as it is in every age. And in times of uncertainty and change, the strong leader can become very beguiling. Strong leaders in the Old Testament, in the fleshly sense, generally don't do very well. They do not do well in the Bible. Weak and humble leaders who trust in God do better. Just think of how King David was chosen, the last in the line of brothers. Something's happening in our day that people of my generation, I'm in my late 40s, would have thought inconceivable 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Christianity in some important parts of the world has significant political cachet now. I keep saying this. And this is very dangerous because people who are not like Moses, who are not trying to avoid the limelight, who are not saying, I don't want it, but who love it, love the power, love the wealth, love the attention, love to speak with many words and have their voice heard, love the attention. These people can see Christians as a means of power, a means to power, and some of them will even claim faith. But be careful. Are they like Moses? Do you imagine them standing before God saying, send somebody else, I don't want to do it? Or are they like numerous wolves in sheep's clothing who constantly led the people of God astray through the Old Testament, and we are warned a lot about in the New? Last week, a woman stood on a stage and forgave a man who 10 days earlier had killed her husband in front of her and her children. And she said this. She said, I forgive him because it's what Christ did. The answer to hate is not hate. And on that same stage, the same day, the most powerful politician in the world stood up and said this. He said, I hate my opponent and I don't want the best for them. And there is the difference between the leader called by God and the leader of the flesh, between meekness and might. We have to remember this when we go on to read the rest of Exodus. Moses didn't want it. He was not in it for himself. For what it's worth, I personally would be very cynical, or am very cynical, of any politician with no previous track record of Christian faith who suddenly claims to have such faith, unless I see them do what Moses does here. Unless I see real repentance. Unless, as Jesus says, you see real fruit. For by their fruit you shall know them. Let's move on, because now we get to this little weird fun story, starting in verse 18. Moses has this encounter with God and goes back to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, please let me go back to my brothers in Egypt to see whether they're still alive. And Jethro said to Moses, go in peace. And the Lord said to Moses in Midian, go back to Egypt, for all the men who are seeking your life are dead. So Moses took his wife and his sons and put them on a donkey and went back to the land of Egypt. And Moses took the staff of God in his hand. And the Lord said to Moses, when you go back to Egypt, see that you do before Pharaoh all the miracles that I have put in your power, but I will harden his heart, so that he will not let the people go. Then you shall say to Pharaoh, thus says the Lord, Israel is my firstborn son, and I say to you, let my son go, that he may serve me. If you refuse to let him go, behold, I will kill your firstborn son. Just pause here for a second. We've had these three previews, which I mentioned at the moment, the preview of the first miracle before Pharaoh, the preview of how God acts, and the preview of the first of the 10th plague. Now we have a preview, the fourth preview, of the 10th plague. Pharaoh's heart will be hard, he will not let the people go, and he will lose his firstborn son, because he refused to free God's firstborn son, Israel. Just a couple of things to really cement in our minds before we go on here. First, Israel is God's firstborn son, and God will fight for his son. And since God is the Almighty One, God will win that battle. In our hyper-individualistic world, this is kind of hard. It's hard for me to get my head around. It probably is hard for you to get your head around too. That although I am, me, John Bryon, I am God's son. And you, if you are in Christ, are all God's sons and daughters. Just like it says at the beginning of John's Gospel, he gave us the right to be called children of God. This is all secondary to the fact that the church, as God's people, grafted into Israel, is God's firstborn son. God fights for the freedom of his church, for his church is his people, and his people, Israel, are his firstborn son. The fact that I am saved is secondary to the fact that I belong to this church, and that we are saved as a people. I am saved as part of a body. I am only a part of a body, a finger or a hand or whatever it might be. A body here in this hall in Selsdon, which has Christ as its head. Christ, God's only begotten son, is the head. And God fights for his firstborn son, Israel. It's the first thing. Second thing is, note this. God says to Pharaoh through Moses, "Let my son go that he may serve me." Exodus is about freedom. That's the way in which the story is commonly used. It's a story about freedom from slavery. And in the 21st century, we often think that freedom means freedom from things. It's freedom from oppression. It's freedom from restriction. It's freedom from limitation about what I can do. But freedom in the Bible doesn't mean that. Freedom in the Bible doesn't mean I just get to do what I want to do. Liberal society emphasizes a freedom like this. The shorthand for it is a freedom from. You're always free from any limitation, free from any oppression. And if you think the story of Exodus or the gospel of Jesus, which is what Exodus points to, is about that kind of freedom, then you will be very disappointed, because the refrain throughout the story of Exodus, and as it takes it through the rest of the Bible, is this: let my son go that he may serve me. Let my son go is only half of it. I'm free from. But there's a second half to that sentence. That he may serve me. It's not just freedom from something, it's freedom to something. You exchange slavery to the oppressor in Egypt, Pharaoh, for slavery to God. You reject slavery, or free from slavery to sin, to slavery to goodness. Slavery from malevolence to slavery of benevolence. Slave and servant in the Bible are generally the same word. God's son is not being freed to do whatever he wants, but to come into the right, good, and loving relationship with the Father. And as we'll see in due course, when they are set free, that will require a law, which will come in the wilderness. Let my son go, that he may serve me. Verse 24. At a lodging place on the way, the Lord met him, that's Moses, and sought to put him to death. Then Zipporah, Moses' wife, took a flint, something sharp, and cut off her son's foreskin and touched his feet with it. It may say Moses on the screen, the word is actually his. Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me. So he, that's God, let him alone. Didn't kill Moses. It was then that she, Zipporah, said, a bridegroom of blood, because of the circumcision. Yeah, I don't know what that means. No, I do. We'll get on to it. We'll just finish the rest of it. The Lord said to Aaron, because it's important for understanding what's just happened. The Lord said to Aaron, go into the wilderness to meet Moses. Aaron is Moses' older brother. So he went and met him at the mountain of God and kissed him. And Moses told Aaron all the words of the Lord with which he had sent him to speak, and all the signs that he had commanded him to do. Then Moses and Aaron went and gathered together all the elders and the people of Israel. Aaron spoke all the words that the Lord had spoken to Moses, and did the signs in the sight of the people. And the people believed. And when they heard that the Lord had visited the people of Israel, and that he had seen their affliction, they bowed their heads and worshipped. This strange little story of this journey on their way back to Egypt. It's the fifth and final preview in this chapter, because what on earth is going on with this business of Zipporah circumcising her eldest son, who's called Gershom. And just to be clear, because some people may not know here, circumcision is the cutting off of the skin at the end of the penis. And it makes lots of us wince when we think about that too much. I want to draw out two parallels with this passage to try and understand it. First, this story is extremely similar to another story which many of you will already know, which has already happened in the Bible, the story of Jacob, otherwise known as Israel, Abraham's grandson. Jacob and Moses both had to flee their home, and they fled somewhere, and where they both fled, they both met a woman at a well, and they both married the woman at the well, and they had children with her. And they both spent many years as shepherds, looking after flocks belonging to their father-in-laws away from their home. And they were both called to return home and to face a brother on their return. Jacob was called to face Esau, who he was estranged from because he had cheated his twin brother. And Moses is called to come back and meet with Aaron, his older brother. On that journey home, they both, at night, encounter the opposition of God. Joseph wrestles with God. And Moses met the Lord who sought to kill him. Both survive the encounter with God with a physical mark to mark that. Joseph has a limp. Sorry, Jacob. Have I been saying Joseph? Just that once, sorry. Jacob has a limp, thank you for the correction, and Moses' son is circumcised. He bears the scar from that. Both of them then continue the journey to meet their brother. So I hope you can see the similarities. These two stories, they're quite close together in the Bible. Park that for a minute. The second parallel is this. That this is a preview of the Passover to come. Moses is an Egyptian-Israelite hybrid. In fact, when he meets Zipporah and she goes and tells Reuel or Jethro, her father, she says, I've met an Egyptian. He's described as an Egyptian. Back in chapter 2. But Moses is on a mission from God to free his brothers and his sisters on behalf of the God of his fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And so Moses has to fully identify with this people. At the moment, he's a hybrid on the way back. But he has to become fully Hebrew, fully Israelite. And that belonging is denoted by the males being circumcised. And Moses has not circumcised his firstborn son. They don't belong. So how can you go back and participate in this great mission to a people that you don't belong to when the God of that people has called you to do that? And so they must be prepared. The son must be circumcised. Later on, when the Passover is given, which we'll get to in due course, it's absolutely clear. If you are not circumcised, you cannot participate in the Passover. It's a condition of the participation. Only those belonging to the covenant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which is a covenant of circumcision, can participate in it. So this, what Moses is doing, is a preparation for the Passover which is to come, the 10th plague. But more than that, there's blood involved. It's a very bloody story. Zipporah cuts off the foreskin of her eldest son and touches his feet with it. Whose feet does she touch? It's not clear. If you've got an ESV, it will say Moses like it did on the screen. And there'll be a footnote saying original language just says his. I tend to think it's probably the Gershom, the boy's legs. But anyway, the blood, it doesn't matter, is daubed on the legs of somebody's body. And later in the Passover, the blood will be daubed on the legs of the door that God will pass over. The angel will pass over. And the son will be spared in that house, the firstborn son. And so drawing these two things together, we see that this is a fifth preview and a final preview of how it is that God saved, which is what the climax of the book of Exodus is in a way, with the Passover. And that in itself is a preview of the greater Passover to come, because we're going to celebrate communion later, and when Jesus inaugurates communion, the new covenant with us, he does it on the night of Passover with the drinking of the blood. If you want to go back to God, Jacob wanted to go back to his land, the land of his father, the land which God had promised them. Moses wants to go back to the land of Egypt, to his people. If you want to go back to God, to return to the land that you belong to with him, you have to face God's opposition on your journey back. You have to face what you deserve. You have to face your sin, you have to face your weakness, you have to face your failure. Jacob, when he went back, was going to have to face Esau, who he cheated. Moses is going back to face a people that he'd run away from. The ones that wanted to kill him were no longer there, but there was resistance and hostility to him. If you want to go back, you have to face your failure. We are failures. Moses was a failure. He knew he was a failure because he bleated to God about it. I'm weak. I'm not eloquent. Send somebody else. Don't send me. And God's anger was kindled, as we just read. We are not up to returning home. None of us is up to going home on our own. We face judgment on that journey for who we are. Jacob was an early preview of that, and Moses is given a sharper preview now. And Passover will make it explicit in due course. There is no way back to the promised land. There is no way back home without death. Either your firstborn dies, or you need to be covered by the blood. The blood denotes death. Gershom, Moses' eldest son, is saved in the same way that all the Hebrew firstborn sons will be saved when the angel of the Lord passes over the houses in the 10th plague. The blood causes the Lord to pass over. But those not covered by the blood will die, as God said to Moses before he set out in that preview we already mentioned. Let my son go, that he may serve me. If you refuse to let him go, behold, I will kill your firstborn son. Israel will go through that same pattern. Jacob went through that pattern. Moses goes through that pattern. Israel will go through it. At the end of what we read just there, they believed Moses. They did the signs. Aaron spoke eloquently. They said, God's coming to save us. They all bowed their heads and they worshipped. But it won't last long because things are about to get worse. Chapter 5, which I think Pete's preaching on next week, is the story of things getting worse. The slavery will intensify, and then the plagues will come, and some of those plagues will affect the Israelites and the Hebrews. But they will strive with God, and they will press on through. The hand of God will act. Things will get worse. You press on, things will get better, and things will be restored to health. And this ultimate pattern points forward to what happens with Jesus, as we've sung about this morning already, at the cross, the ultimate fulfillment of it. God comes to earth as a man to contend with God. God contends with God. The God-man contends with God. The true Israelite. Jesus is true Israel. The one who truly strives with God. The only Son who then bears the sins of all the people, bears our sins, and his blood is shed. And he takes on death, and he will be victorious in resurrection, and then lead his people through their wilderness to the promised land, a new creation. It's a strange little story, but it does point through to the cross. We face the opposition of God, rightly so, and then the blood covers us, touches us. The Lord passes us over, and we are rescued and saved. Things don't immediately get better. We enter a wilderness, but in hope of heading towards a promised land where he has already gone ahead of us as our representative, as the firstborn amongst the resurrection, the first who is raised from the dead. We're going to take communion now. And as we come, we're going to drink the blood, and we're going to eat the body of Jesus. That's what they represent. And it's a grace that comes to us that we participate in this pattern of God's passing over, that we are covered by this covenant which has been made with us so that we are saved. And it's for that reason that to participate in this communion is a bit like how the Israelites were to participate in Passover. You had to be circumcised, had to be the circumcision. You have to have entered into union with Christ to participate. Normally that's through baptism. So it's for those who are his people, who are Israel, who come and share in eating his body and drinking his blood, so that we are covered in the day of God's visitation to us, knowing that we are saved, part of this great people on our way home, and that his striving against us has been taken by the sacrificial lamb.